Hey everybody, Zeal Brothers here with another video. This one in response to RFK Jr., Robert Kennedy Jr. is in trouble. And the reason he's in trouble is because he made some comparisons talking about people who were against the anti-vaxxers, that they're worse than the Nazis were against the Jews. And so his argument was that if you compare the lack of the ability to make a point and for it to stick on social media, and you compare that to how the Nazis squeezed on information was, the Nazis had less power because they didn't have as much technology to oppress differing opinions. And so people blasted this opinion. And the reason they blasted that opinion is because they felt that he was making a comparison and making basically his political stance, because he is known as a big anti-vaxxer and he's been big against the COVID vaccine. And so people felt that his argument was extreme. And here's just a thing about it. I do think that whenever you draw a comparison to Hitler, you are making an extreme argument. But the article that I read by Michelle Smith, which was in the AP, the article that I read, it was so biased, and it just exposed so much why people like Robert Kennedy Jr. are more popular in the media right now. And let's just talk about it. Because did he make an extreme argument? Yes, he did, right? He compared the response to people who are anti-vaxxers to people who got killed and slaughtered. Now, that wasn't his point in comparison, but his point is easily lampooned as that, right? It'll be no different if I said, man, you basically putting us in slavery. People won't be like, come on, man, we're not putting you in slavery. But if I make a direct one-to-one comparison and say, hey, the attitude that you have towards me right now is the same attitude that a slave master might have towards a slave woman, right? You could make that comparison if it's just a simple point of comparison, right? And so I can make that argument, but the reason why I wouldn't, even if I had one valid point of contention, is because people are going to ignore the fact, right? They're going to ignore that one point of agreement that I might be making within a larger argument and focus on the bigger thing. You're saying they're Hitler. He wasn't saying that, right? But his point was badly spoken because of that. But the truth of the matter is that a lot of people make comparisons to Hitler all the time, on both sides of the political aisle. If you've been around long enough, you will realize and remember when people were comparing Bush to Hitler. And you'll remember years after that, people were comparing Obama to the Antichrist. And years after that, people were calling Trump Hitler. And so you have a lot of comparisons on both sides of the aisle. Now, Robert Kennedy Jr. is a leftist, but he's an anti-vaxxer, and that kind of puts him against the mainstream ideas right now. But when you look at his argument that he is saying, and let's just look at a larger point and ignore the fact that he made that comparison, it is troubling when you look at the lack of free speech that is out there. And we'll just talk about some other stories later on. But I do want to preface it by saying this. You cannot say something overtly about the vaccine or about the virus without there being a warning posted on your video. You cannot make a statement in your status about it without some kind of warning being put on Facebook. And so the idea that free speech is in danger is actually true and valid. And it's something that you can verify for yourself. And the truth of the matter is there's not a lot that we see that we can prove about this vaccine or about the virus. And the most troubling part is the numbers that we get out of China, which oftentimes don't get questioned. So we don't really know for sure the deaths in China, and we don't know the extent that the virus damaged them. And nobody really knows, because we know that dictatorships are liars. And the Chinese are ruled by a dictatorship, and they are liars, and they constantly report false numbers for almost everything. It's the same thing they do with their currency. They manipulate their currency. And it's hard sometimes to read what's really going on in that country. Now, they're open enough where we can kind of get, behind the scenes and tell what's going on. But the truth of the matter is that there's been so many lies about this vaccine. And the troubling thing about it is I used to think that conspiracy theorists were some of the dumbest people you could ever meet, right? So somebody who believed that 9/11 was an inside job, I would just, somebody would tell me that, and maybe if I was being nice that day, I would just nod along with it. But I couldn't really. I immediately put that person in kook category. But it's this exposes the state of the world we're in, where kook theories are now plausible. What do I mean? The idea that the virus was created in a lab, that should be a kook theory. If this came out 12 years ago, it will be considered a crazy theory. It's not a crazy theory. It's very plausible. The idea that the guy who is fighting the virus in the United States may be the same one who funded the creation of that virus. It sounds kooky. It is very plausible. The same guy said, don't wear a mask, is now saying wear a double mask. Again, that's just supposed to be taken on as normal, that he constantly contradicts himself. And then you look at how we've treated this virus, and you get the idea that there is no decision made that somebody doesn't profit a whole lot off of it. So you get a vaccine, get 2 doses, get a booster. What company wouldn't support you having to get another product? What company wouldn't support people mandating that you buy their product? And so it's just amazing to me looking at these decisions and looking at how I used to think some lines of thought were conspiratorial, and now they seem more and more plausible because the world is going crazy right now. And I think we need to reflect on that. We need to reflect on that when we can look at somebody like Robert Kennedy Jr. and actually have to take him seriously. We have to take him seriously because the world is so insane right now that he may be saying something that is plausible. And we have to take his argument seriously rather than poo-poo it. And the problem that I have with this article, and I'll put a link for this article in the description, but the problem that I have with this article is that it never takes anything that he says seriously. All it does is quote every critic that they can find, every Holocaust museum owner, every Jewish spokesman, all of that. These same people will not say anything about somebody that's on the far left who are growing increasingly anti-Semitic. It will not say anything about the far left and the civil rights movement that is growing increasingly anti-Jewish. It will not say anything about our national foreign policy that is growing increasingly pro-Palestine and increasingly anti-Israeli. But hey, that's where we at right now. We got a media that you honestly shouldn't trust. I read them because sometimes there will be facts through the mud, right? I'm gleaning the truth through the mud. And I encourage you to do the same. Maybe read them, but read them with both eyes open.